Good morning. It is Wednesday, September the 15th, 2001. Welcome to another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association and the Black Press of America's Let It Be Known. Tomorrow is a big day for the Black Press and the National Newspaper Publishers Association. It is the National Leadership Awards reception. We have such a huge day planned. We're going to, of course, honor Dr. Ebony Hilton, Dr. James Hildreth, and also Congresswoman Cori Bush, Senators Raphael Warnock and Cory Booker, and Olympic champion Allison Felix. Lots of surprises, lots of great stuff. We'll be joined by the great Gabrielle Union. Also, Lou Gossett Jr. is going to make an appearance. And, of course, Regina Bell. So join us tomorrow, www.virtuenmpa2021.com, beginning at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Lots of fun tomorrow. It is hot today. Middle of September, it's like 90 degrees here in the D.C. area. Heat is the top cause of weather-related deaths in the U.S. Moreover, extreme heat is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease, the top cause of death worldwide. But risk differs by race, making up only 13% of the population. African Americans have the highest death rates from heart disease and the second highest death rates from heat-related illness. Dr. Natasha DeJarnett, assistant professor of medicine at the University of Louisville, will tie it all in for us, the connections from Hurricane Ida and the Caldor Fire, and how identifying certain populations should influence our response to climate change. She'll join us in a moment. But first, let us bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. And this is the day that the Lord have made. We're so glad to be here on September the 15th, 2021. I bring you greetings from Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. We represent 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies across the United States. And we're pleased to be on this Let It Be Known. And of course, tomorrow we have our National Leadership Awards reception, where we're giving out major awards to people who've made an outstanding contribution to Black America and to humanity at large.
Yep, absolutely. Looking forward to it. It all begins at 3 p.m. Eastern. The awards reception starts at 7, but we encourage you to join us early, as we stated, special guests tomorrow. Senate Democrats, Dr. Chavis, in the news, yesterday unveiled a new elections bill that aims to protect voting rights in states and has support from its moderate wing. The new bill, the Freedom to Vote Act, is more scaled back than previous pieces of voting rights legislation like the For the People Act, but it would establish some federally mandated election rules. Its future in the Senate, of course, is threatened by Republicans who have generally opposed federal laws that govern how states run their elections. The latest piece of legislation would expand early voting options, voter identification requirements, access to mail-in ballots, and allow for some same-day registration on election day. It would also battle partisan gerrymandering by requiring states to follow specific criteria for redrawing congressional districts and giving them the option to choose how to develop those redistricting plans, including having an independent commission. It also makes Election Day a national holiday. But Dr. Chavis, again, unless they can pull some sort of rabbit out of the hat, right now they don't have the votes on the Republican side.
Well, we're for full voting rights, not partial voting rights. We're for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We're for the People Act. And this latest compromise in the Senate is an attempt to get Republican votes. But we have to learn from our history. Every time you compromise, they still don't vote. So I think we should keep pushing for the major legislation, and that is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which has already been passed the House and needs to pass the Senate, and the For the People Act, which has passed the House and needs to pass the Senate. I think they need to use reconciliation not only on the infrastructure bill, but they need to use reconciliation on passing these voting rights bills. It is critical in 2021 that we have voting rights, because we're getting ready to go into 2022. And we all know what's going to happen next year if we let these voter suppression measures stand in Texas and Florida and Georgia and other states. The Carolinas, about 40 states have introduced legislation to suppress the votes, to suppress the black vote. And we in the black press, we're not going for the okey-doke, as Malcolm would say. We're going to plead our own cause, and we're going to continue to push for full voting rights, not only for black people, but for all people in America.
Yeah, and also in the news this morning, nationally renowned civil rights attorney Ben Crump and Antonio Ramanucci launched a call-a-thon that will run through September 16th, asking supporters to call their U.S. senators to urge them to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The campaign's goal is to generate 50,000 calls to senators in 50 hours. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, sponsored by Representative Karen Bass out of California, passed in the House on March the 3rd, but the bill is currently stalled in the Senate due to partisan disagreements on the changes to nationwide policing it would enact. Supporters of the police reform legislation can visit www.act.bencrump.com, where they will submit their phone number and be automatically connected to their senator's office to encourage a yes vote for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So, Dr. Chavis, Ben Crump, again, is trying to push this thing forward.
Well, again, we should join with Ben Crump, the Black Press of America. We stand with our civil rights lawyers, our civil rights leaders, and Ben Crump is one of the leading freedom-fighting civil rights lawyers in the country. We support this initiative. And again, the NMPA, we are hopeful that the Congress, the Congressional Black Caucus, and all the members of Congress will do the right thing. The problem is not the House, it's the Senate. They've passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And we need to make sure now that we get that passed to the Senate. Again, I think they need to do away with these filibusters in the Senate and get all these legislation passed on police reform, on environmental justice, on voting rights, on healthcare access. There's so much infrastructure. All these things have been held up in the Senate, and it's time for us to push forward. I think what we saw yesterday, Stacey, in California, with an overwhelming voter turnout in California, particularly among Blacks and Latinos, not only kept Governor Newsom, the California governor, in office, but it sends a message that we're not going to take these voter suppression laws or these tactics and antics that are going on in the United States Senate. We got to keep pushing forward for freedom, justice, and equality in every area of life.
Yeah, and California Governor Gavin Newsom soundly beat back efforts to recall him. He won about 70% of the vote yesterday in California. Congressman Donald McEachin and Senator Raphael Warnock introduced yesterday, Dr. Chavis, the Device Access for Every American Act to ensure more Americans can afford connected devices. The legislation would authorize the FCC to establish a program to administer up to $400 vouchers for low-income Americans to purchase laptops, tablets, and desktop computers. The Device Access for Every American Act would allocate $2 billion in federal funding for establishment and implementation of the voucher program authorized by the FCC. Or they would actually authorize the FCC to administer those funds to individuals and families to purchase a connected device. It's a really, really sound piece of legislation, Dr. Chavis, by Senator Warnock and Congressman McEachin.
Yes, and know that we are giving Senator Raphael Warnock one of our awards tomorrow evening at the NMPA's, at the virtual NMPA's 2021 National Leadership Awards reception. So it's not surprising Senator Warnock is taking this leadership on getting not only broadband access, but device access to our communities. And the United States is falling behind. Like in the nation France, Stacey, everybody has free access to broadband because the government ensures that every French citizen has access to broadband. The United States is lagging. And I think that these discriminatory practices, these disparities when it comes to African Americans and Latinos and other communities of color, again, in all these areas, they're connected. That's what systemic racism does. It's not one sector of the economy. It's all sectors of the economy. where systemic racism is alive and well, and we have to challenge it in all of its manifestations.
Yeah, and just a quick response to a question posed by Bobby Henry down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at the Westside Gazette. He says, is there a phone script for that call? Let's speak in one loud voice. In fact, if you go to the website there where you can register for the call, I believe there is, Bobby, www.act.bencrump.com. ACT is ACT, act.bencrump.com. Heat, of course, is the top cause of weather-related deaths in the U.S., Dr. Chavis. And we know your role, Dr. Chavis, in the environmental justice movement. There's been no one more prominent than yourself. But Dr. Natasha DeJarnett ties in connections from Hurricane Ida and the Caldor Fire and how identifying certain populations should influence our response to climate change. Let us bring on from the University of Louisville, Dr. DeJarnett. And she said it's Djarnett and not Djarnett, Dr. Chavis.
I got you, Dr. DeJarnett. Thank you. And we so much salute and appreciate your leadership in this vital part of our national discussion for racial and social justice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chavis, Stacey Brown. I'm deeply honored for the chance to get to speak with you today, and also am inspired by the great attention that you bring to issues that uniquely burden our community.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we are inspired by the work you do. Tell us a little bit about that from the top. We'll start there about heat being the top cause of weather-related deaths. Talk a little bit about that, if you will, Doctor.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you framed it that way. Heat is the top cause of natural weather-related death here in the U.S. And climate change is increasing the frequency and severity of heat waves. Heat waves are occurring more often and heat intensity is increasing. And that is all in conjunction with the length of the heat wave season extending. So exposure to extreme heat can increase our risk of heat-related illness. That includes heat stroke, which can be deadly. Respiratory diseases like asthma complications can be made worse by exposure to extreme heat. And then extreme heat also increases our risk of heart disease. The leading cause of heat-related death is cardiovascular disease. And cardiovascular disease is the top cause of illness and death worldwide. So here in the US, 1 in every 3 people has cardiovascular disease. And to look further into heat, the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report in 2020 published a study from the Climate and Health team at their National Center for Environmental Health. And they examined the underlying causes of heat-related conditions from 2004 to 2018. And they found that cardiovascular diseases accounted for nearly half, 49%, of the underlying causes of heat-related death. So this matters because climate projections predict further warming, and the mortality rate associated with temperature changes is expected to rise. And not only do heat waves exacerbate cardiovascular mortality and increase risk of death, heat wave also exacerbates inequities, particularly for older adults, definitely communities of color, including African-American communities, and then also income insecure families or impoverished communities.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis, again, as I said at the top, you have been fighting this, for the environment for a long time. I wanted you to jump in with Dr. DeJarnett on this conversation.
Well, I just want to again salute the great, not only academic scholarship and research work that Dr. Djarnett is doing, but also make the connection between climate justice and environmental justice and overall social and racial justice. There's so many disparities. And I think also, Dr. Djarnett, there's some myths in the African-American community about heat. Because we are descendants of Africa, there's some brothers and sisters in the hood that say, well, man, we can stand heat, because we have melanin. Don't worry about the intense heat. We can live through it. But a lot of African-Americans do have cardiovascular situations. And too many, I have a sister who's a physician that says a lot of times at the end of one's life is due to heart failure. And the contributing factor to heart failure, as you've stated, very often is undue stress related to the presence of heat. Can you go into just a little bit more specific about how heat specifically affects people of African descent in the United States and throughout the world?
Absolutely. I'll step back just a little bit because our research into the connection between heat and heart disease, this is made urgent because our exposure to extreme heat is becoming far more frequent and far more intense, and that's due to climate change. And it's not only heat, this extra trapped heat exposes us to warmer temperatures, certainly, but it also creates conditions that are conducive to extreme weather events like Hurricane Ida, like the Caldor Fire, and many other examples that we've seen just this summer alone.
Yes.
But heat in the US is particularly concerning for populations who work and play outside, older individuals, people with pre-existing conditions, and African Americans. Children. Children spend more time outdoors playing, running. They have a lack of impulse control, so they don't know when they've overdone it, need to take a break or drink some water and cool off. People that work in agriculture and construction are more exposed. Older adults have pre-existing illness that also renders them susceptible. And there's even another population in here that's uniquely burdened. And I will get to African Americans, but non-US citizens. There's a study that found that just 4% of the deaths from heat-related illness 2005 to 2014 were among US citizens. So 96% of deaths were among non-US citizens. And Stacy said it from the beginning, although African Americans only make up 13% of the US population, we have the highest death rates from heart disease and the second highest death rates from heat-related illness. And some factors to consider: redline communities. There's been a lot of research that's coming out of redline communities and how health burdens are worse there. Formerly redline communities are hotter and have less tree cover. And this has been proven to have tree cover has been proven to have many health benefits and cleaning the air. So, a study from Nardone and their colleagues examined the difference between historical racial redlining and emergency department visits due to asthma across California. And they found that redline areas overlapped with the areas that had higher rates of emergency room visits for asthma. But also, why do redlined areas have these worsened health outcomes? And there are a number of factors at play, but tree canopy can be one of them. And a recent study from Hoffman and colleagues in 2020, they found that redline communities have less tree cover. And trees have this beneficial impact on air quality and against heat. But heat further decreases the quality of the air that we breathe. So there's that intersection between heat and air quality. And then Hoffman and colleagues further found differences in surface temperatures in these communities that were formerly redlined. So long story short, the redline communities are hotter, and the redline communities have more, I'm sorry, they're hotter and they also have less tree cover. And this may be very closely related.
Yeah, and Dr. DeJarnett, while we're talking about heat today, isn't it extreme cold also an issue for communities of color and the elderly who may not be in a financial position to secure adequate heating in their homes and apartments?
It absolutely is. This is an excellent point. The way climate change has been framed, we are thinking warmer, warmer, warmer. And climate change is warmer surface temperatures that cause an imbalance in our climate system. So we saw examples of this earlier this year in Texas that was hit by extreme cold. And then we also saw examples of this similarly this year in the Pacific Northwest that was hit by unprecedented extreme heat. And as we talk more about climate change, the word unprecedented is used so often, letting you know that there is absolutely something that's happening here. And as you said, it can, people that have limited access to resources, that may not have accesses or affordability to heaters, air conditioning, those can be life-saving in terms of those conditions. But the urgency is here. Just last week, more than 200 medical journals issued a joint warning about climate change. The Lancet has called climate change the greatest threat to public health. So is the World Health Organization, the American Public Health Association, leadership of the National Environmental Health Association, and countless other agencies. And so the urgency is certainly here, and you've certainly pointed out some of the challenges and complications that are further exposed by climate events, be it extreme heat, be it extreme cold, as well as air quality, which is responsible for 7 to 8 million deaths annually in the world. On top of that, flooding, drought, as well as increases in vector-borne diseases.
Yeah, we again are talking to Dr. Natasha DeJarnett. She is a researcher at the University of Louisville's Christina Lee Brown Environmental Institute. Dr. Chavez, again, I'm going to throw it back to you because I know, again, this is a topic of great interest of yours.
Well, Dr. DeJarnett, again, thank you. Can you speak about, from your perspective, why are people denying science in America? We're denying science related to COVID-19. We're denying science related to climate change. In fact, it is almost as if these issues have become political rather than scientific. Can you speak to the importance of basing one's life on true facts? We in the Black press, we try to make sure that our community gets the truth. The Bible says the truth will set you free, but you have to get the truth in order to be free. And that's where the Black press comes in. But can you speak about this syndrome now in the United States that's politically driven, but by far-right conservative people to deny science?
It is certainly challenging to see this and to experience this. I started my career in public health and environmental health, assuming everybody cares about health, but there are different vantage points to it. Everybody does care about their health. One question is, do people care mostly about their individual health, that of them and their family, or do they also care or motivated to act on health to protect their communities? But the science is clear. The science is extremely clear when it comes to climate change. Well over 95% of scientists agree, I believe it's 97% of scientists agree that climate change is real. And one thing that will certainly help is that we communicate clear messages that are short, simple, and repeated by a variety of trusted resources that will certainly help, but also that we communicate climate through health professionals because we need trusted messengers. So having nurses in particular explain this, take opportunities to explain this to their patients. Nurses are the most trusted professionals, period. Not just the most trusted health professionals, but they're the most trusted professionals. But they and medical doctors have the benefit and burden of being able to see how climate is showing up in their clinics. So sharing their stories will be quite helpful to dispel. Storytelling may go even further than sharing data. I am a public health nerd. I am a data nerd. Data works for me. But data doesn't necessarily move everyone. So let's throw the kitchen sink at this. Let's communicate in a number of ways. The science is there. There's an abundance of research to support this. And what I appreciate is that you've discussed both climate and COVID, and we see the denial aspects on both. And we're living the health experiences of what happens when there is denial of both of these. And so I'm glad you brought COVID in. I've watched your newscast and I've seen how COVID has been a key topic of discussion. And I certainly appreciate that you have increased education, awareness, helped spread credible information about COVID-19 and the vaccine. And I came on this show thinking to myself, people are going to say, why is she talking about COVID, of climate change, when we're in the COVID-19 pandemic? But really, we don't have the luxury to wait on either end.
That's right.
In 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change told us we have 12 years to act on climate.
Yeah.
And this year alone, we've seen numerous examples, including, as you pointed out, the Texas freeze earlier this year, extreme heat in the Pacific Northwest, wildfires on the West Coast that are so strong they're affecting air quality all the way to New York State. And we're in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida and the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Nicholas. And all of these have affected health. And we simply don't have the luxury to wait. But beyond that urgency, what also strikes me is the interconnected relationship between climate and COVID. Air pollution, number one, is associated with increased COVID mortality. So
Yes.
cities that have higher levels of air pollution also have higher COVID mortality rates. Here in the US, Francesca Dominici and others found that a 1 unit increase in PM 2.5 was associated with an 8% increase in COVID mortality. This relationship was also established internationally, where the same increase in PM 2.5 caused a 12% increase in COVID cases in England. And then even further here in the US, more evidence, there was a regulatory pause, or there was a pause on environmental regulation during early in the COVID pandemic. And Amanda Perseco and her colleagues at American University found that in some communities, communities that had 6 or more toxic sites, they had an increase in pollution during this time, though less cars were on the road. And this correlated with higher COVID deaths in these communities, and also that these communities were more likely to have a higher percentage of Black and African American people.
Yeah.
Also, the health disparities that have been uncovered by COVID-19. The same populations that are susceptible to COVID-19 are the same populations that bear a higher burden of climate change, and that's older adults, people of color, African Americans, Hispanic, Latinx, and Native Americans, and then also people that are income insecure, that didn't have the ability to work from home, that may have even lost their jobs. And then also, COVID complicates disaster response on one hand, like being able to evacuate to shelters, providing transportation to be able to evacuate, access to cooling stations. But then on the other hand, COVID or climate complicates COVID mitigation, like our need for distancing during this time to reduce our exposures to COVID. So I greatly appreciate that you're pointing out that the challenges with communicating these has certainly affected both climate and COVID, and the interrelated nature between the two of them makes that even more concerning.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
thank you for that. Yeah, we're quickly running out of time. We're with Dr. DeJarnett, Natasha DeJarnett of the University of Louisville's Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute. We had some audience questions that we wanted to get to. I'll try and just real quick, so everyone knows, you could pick one of these questions or all of them if you can just sum them all up. But so we start with David Youngblood. Can you relate the overall health of African Americans within the historical context of slavery? Bobby Henry asks, what are 3 things that we can do immediately to address climate change? James Wright is asking, have mainstream climate change activists ignored the concerns of communities of color? We'll probably have to leave it there, but if you could just give us just an overview in the next 60 seconds, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I'm glad for these questions. These are the right questions to be asking, and there's much that we can do. We can join local grassroots groups because climate can be daunting and we can feel very alone in this space. But if we serve with others that have the same mission, we have a much larger voice. In addition, we can advocate for improved access to cooling centers and air conditioning as well. And then we can certainly look further into nature-based solutions, which is what we offer at University of Louisville in our Green Heart Project, where we are planting trees for healthier air. And I welcome you to visit greenheartlouisville.com to find out more information.
Fantastic.
Dr. Chavis, your closing thoughts.
Well, again, we thank Dr. Natasha DeJarnett for coming on Let It Be Known. We're going to have to bring you back. You have such vital information. And so I would say this is round one. We got to bring you back for other rounds so you can help educate our viewers, help educate our readers. That's what the Black Press is all about, giving life-saving, vital information as soon as we can, as much as we can, to the constituencies that we serve across America. So again, thank you, and I assure you we're going to have you back.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely honored to be here.
Yeah, and don't forget to check out the NMPA and the Black Press of America on TikTok at NMPA Black Press. And make plans now. It's tomorrow. Please sign up, www.virtuenmpa2021.com for the NMPA's National Leadership Awards reception. Again, all the festivities began at 3 p.m. with a special appearance by the great Regina Bell, followed by Gabrielle Union. You're not going to want to miss that conversation with Gabrielle Union as she talks about her family. She talks about Black life in general, and she talks about why she was mad at Dwayne Wade. Y'all got to check that out. He wouldn't give her some water when she needed it, y'all. We're not going to stand for that. But let it be known. Remember this, always teach the truth, whether it fills a room or clears it out. Stay safe, stay well, and listen to people like Dr. Natasha DeJarnett. Climate change is real. We'll see you tomorrow.